Should be working, I think. Yep. All right. June, you're the first guest from Australia on the show. Thank you for being here today.
No worries. It's great to be here, and especially after such a difficult couple of years, it's
Yeah.
fantastic to still be able to talking about fundraising.
Absolutely. In our work with clients, and sometimes on this podcast, we talk a lot about the importance of having a great fundraising offer. Like entire organizations have been built around the great offer. If we think of what World Vision did with child sponsorship, or Heifer International with giving livestock, but not all offers are equally appealing, or rather, not all organizations are able to sort of have the same kinds of universally understood and universally persuasive offers. So today, we're going to get into how to fundraise if you have unsexy offers. But before we get into that, let's do a bit of a primer. What is an offer?
All right. So I guess, like at its simplest level, the offer is what you actually ask your donor to give to. However, it's more than that because so many organisations I work with, they kind of go, oh, well, we just want to ask for support. It's like, I'm sorry, that's just not an offer. Okay, more specifically, the offer is actually a chance for your donor to give something really specific to the beneficiary or participant in your programs who generally urgently needs something that they actually can't get without the donor's help.
Right.
And look, lots of charities are uncomfortable with asking for really specific things because they feel, well, first of all, they feel uncomfortable with asking. And then the next thing as well is that they don't like to ask for something specific because they feel like it's not representative of their work. But
Right.
honestly, that doesn't matter. Like, donors actually don't need to know necessarily about the full breadth of your work. Or if you want them to know about that, there are other avenues in which you can actually tell donors about those things. But when you're actually asking for money, you need to ask for money for a very specific project or item that the donor can actually picture or understand. So I guess, yeah, at its simplest level, like if you're lucky enough to do one of the three C's, like cancer or children or cute animals, then it's really,
Yep.
really easy. But not all of us. It's not that easy for all of us.
Yeah,
So
for sure. So you've touched on some things here. You've touched on an offer needs to be very specific. It needs to meet a real need, solve a real problem. What are some of the other sort of building blocks of a great offer when we're starting to think about creating an offer for our organization?
okay, well, the first thing I think I'd like to talk a bit more about is that whole concept of being tangible. So you
Hmm.
want something, I guess, at its simplest level, you want something that the donor can actually picture in their mind. So if the donor can actually picture it in their mind, um, like whether it's food or housing or hospital equipment, something that they can actually see or touch or feel,
Right.
that's actually, you then have the makings of a really great offer. What you don't want is abstract concepts. Like, you don't want to ask a donor for $50 to provide dignity or to provide hope or even a brighter future. Like, it's just not specific enough. And also, if you ask for those things, you're not actually you're also not being unique enough as well, because every charity wants to provide dignity and hope and a brighter future for their
Yeah.
beneficiaries. Now, the second thing as well is that ideally you want your offer to evoke some kind of emotional response. So that means when you frame your offer, you want to frame it around an individual, not a group. So it's to provide food for a child in need, not food for millions of children who are
Right.
starving. You want it to be focused on an individual.
Yeah.
Similarly, if it's something like medical equipment or a well or something like that, again, you still want it to focus. You want to focus it on the person, because people give to people, not to programs or equipment. So if you're fundraising for a piece of hospital equipment, for example, that's great, but you want the offer to be focused on, we want this piece of equipment so people So cancer patients can have more years of life with their families, or something like that, where you're actually building a connection. You're trying to build a connection between the donor and the beneficiary, and that's an emotional, and they can have some kind of emotional response. It's very hard to have an emotional response to, to a piece of equipment or a
That's right.
building or
Yeah.
that kind of,
Yeah.
like, you don't cry over,
Right.
yeah, over a piece of
Yeah.
medical equipment or over a well. Even what you cry over is the child who has to drink dirty water, or you know, or the cancer patient that is going to miss out on meeting their first grandchild or something like that.
Right.
And then,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then finally, as well, ideally, you also want your offer to speak to the donor's values. So if your offer is around providing food, then that's, related to the values that donors have, where nobody should be without food, and everyone has a human right to food or to shelter, or they have a right to health care, and nobody should actually have to miss out on an education, especially if they're really, really bright and intelligent. But just because they're a girl, their families don't want to support their education, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, and if it's an environmental charity, then obviously you want to actually speak to the donor's love of nature, or love of animals,
Right.
or love of the natural environment, and these places that actually meant a lot to you when you were growing up, and which are disappearing. So
Right.
yeah, so I think that's a good starting point. So you're
Yeah.
looking at something tangible, something that evokes an emotional response, and something that speaks to a donor's values.
Right. So that's a great starting point. One of the things that we sometimes see is offers that it's not that they're super generic; it's that they're super lofty,
Yeah,
and they might speak to a donor's values, right? So a donor might really care about hungry kids, or they might care about, education, and then the offer is something like "end world hunger," or it's
yeah,
like "put every child in the world in a classroom." That is our mission. And I think maybe sometimes fundraisers think, we got to have a big, bold vision, and that will attract money. And certainly with a lot of major giving, that is often the case. But even so, you got to break down the steps to get to that big, big, bold vision, right? Like
yeah.
you gotta lead people there.
Well, I think the big thing there is that the donor needs to feel that they're having an impact. And while I think it's important to cast the bigger picture vision, if it's to put every child into a classroom or whatever the case that might be, that's great. But you need to still bring it down to a level where it's like, okay, I'm having an impact on one child's life. I might not be able to put every child into a classroom, but I can put at
Yeah.
least one child into a classroom.
Right.
So that's what your ask needs to center around. It's like, well, with your $50 gift, or with your $100 gift, or with your monthly gift, or whatever the case might be, you can actually ensure that one child will finish their schooling and be able to do something with their life that they wouldn't have been able to do without you. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the heart of a lot of child sponsorship offers, but it doesn't have to be child sponsorship. It's it's about giving something specific, or providing something specific that the donor can do, which can be achieved with their gift, no matter how small it is.
Yeah. Yeah, because the donor knows that she on her own is not going to be able to end world hunger.
Yeah,
And so it might even read as a little bit disingenuous to her at best. At worst, it might turn her off and make her feel bad that she can't do anything about this gigantic problem that you're sort of laying out in front of her. So something
yeah,
specific,
totally.
something that is meaningful to the donor, matches their values. If it can be, if a donor can picture it, if you can touch it, feel it, see it, feel it physically, but also emotionally in your heart.
Yeah,
Those are great places to start. Now, I know a lot of fundraisers are totally with you here. This is what they're already doing. They might run into some internal constraints. They might run into a funding model that might make people, maybe leadership, a little bit internally, a little bit careful about being super specific in those kinds of asks, and they want to keep it broad. But they understand I think most fundraisers, or a lot of them, understand um, in their heart that this is the way that we build meaningful relationships with donors, and that donors can meaningfully impact change in the world.
Yeah.
However, um, not all causes have that kind of a tangible thing, right? There are offers, there are causes that just don't have this sort of physical deliverable on the other end, if you will. They're not
Mhm.
they're not providing meals or medical care or building schools. It's less sexy than that, right? Like one organization we were talking to, they're like, we've been working for 30 years to change this one specific piece of legislation, like this one policy.
Oh, yes.
Which will have a massive effect if they're able to change it, right? Like it will. If you're working on legislation, that's a huge lever down the line,
Yeah.
but it is a very unsexy offer when there
Mhm.
are starving children and animals that need to be rescued. To pay for a bunch of lobbyists and researchers and analysts to be working on legislation seems not urgent.
Yeah.
So let me tee it up this way for you. Can we still fundraise for unsexy offers?
Yeah, definitely. I guess that's a lot of what my work is. When I begin working with a client, is like, well, okay, what are we going to actually be asking for funds for? And I actually think that it doesn't matter how unsexy your offer is. There is a way of making it more tangible and attractive to potential donors. Now, I will put a caveat on that and say, look, there are probably some offers where it's where they're not necessarily suitable for individual givers. You might be
Yeah,
able to make the offer attractive to maybe a trust or a foundation or a single major giver who cares about that kind of about your particular issue, or what you're raising funds for. But in terms of individual giving, I think there are still a lot of unsexy offers which can be made attractive to your average, mum and pop or granny or grandma
hmm,
donor that's out there. So I'd like to talk a bit about the one that you mentioned, Mike, shortly, but just as I guess like a to start things off, like one which I find really really prevalent is that a lot of clients that we work with, they do they do training of some
right.
kind. So
Yeah,
they might train doctors, or they might train teachers, or they might train. So it's not sending a child to school, but
yeah,
the child can't be educated if you don't have teachers that are willing to go to remote villages in India or Africa or South America
right,
or wherever it is. And you can't provide healthcare to these really remote places unless you've got doctors and midwives and people like that who are willing to go out to these places as well. So
right,
training local people is really important. Um, and I guess what we then have to do is to actually link. Um, we need to actually link that we have to actually link the training back to what the end benefit is going to be. And we can talk a bit more about benefits later on. But essentially, it's like, well, um, the question that you need to ask is why? Like, why is the training important? Okay, so say, for example, you want to train teachers. It's like, well, why is training teachers important? Well, it's important because um, children need to be educated, but they can't get teachers in remote villages. And it's like, well, why is that? Why is that important? It's like, well, without teachers being able to go out into remote villages, then then these children will remain uneducated and in poverty for many
right,
years. So we then so when you actually talk about training, you actually need to link it with a benefit, which in this case would be, you know, we want please give $50 towards training a teacher, or $50 a month towards training a teacher, so a child can finish their primary schooling or their high schooling or whatever the case might be. Um, and that way, you're still linking it then back to the child and to the end benefit, and which is more tangible and more emotional for the donor than just saying, oh, we need to train we need to train te- we need to train teachers.
Sure. Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I like that approach. That's a design thinking concept as well, which is just ask why 5 times
yeah,
to try to get at sort of
yeah,
the real nugget of
yeah,
truth,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
try to tease out some meaning, because meaning creates emotion. So that's great. So we can just start asking why and go further into it, and we're listening for what journalists call seeing the story.
yeah, yeah,
You're just
definitely.
trying to see what's in here, what would be a story that a donor might be interested in. So that's fantastic. You talked about benefits a little bit, and I actually would love to get into that. There is this concept in commercial advertising, focus on benefits and not features,
Mhm.
and that kind of applies to our work as well. I know you've done some writing and thinking about that as well.
Yeah.
So maybe you can help us explore that concept a little bit. There's features, there's benefits, there's programs, there's outcomes. How should we think about this?
Okay, so I think the simplest way is to think about, like, perhaps your let's take your phone. Like, if your iPhone, or if you've got a Samsung, then your Galaxy, or whatever phone it is that you're using at the moment. And a feature of that phone, like, I remember, a few years back when Apple released a new iPhone, and and a big feature of that phone was the Retina display. All right, so the Retina display was was meant to make your images look really amazing, high definition, more vivid color, really lifelike, all that kind of thing. So the feature, I guess, of that particular iPhone that was being promoted was the Retina display. But the reason why it was important, or the benefit of having the Retina display, was that you had amazing looking images. You had lifelike images, really great color. So that's the difference between the feature and the benefit. The feature is the what, but the benefit is why that's actually important.
Yeah.
Or if you take, and the interesting thing about that too, as well, is that I always found it really fascinating that Apple chose, in that particular case, in all their promotions, to feature the Retina display, which isn't even actually the core purpose of the phone. Like, at its heart, a phone is to make calls. It's more than that these days, but it's
Right.
like
Yeah.
they never even focused on the fact that you can make phone calls anymore, because that was, I guess that was kind of like an expected feature, but they made a really big deal out of this one feature. So you could argue that that was not representative of the Apple iPhone, because there was all this focus on the Retina display, um, and the images that you would get from the camera and all that kind of thing. But that was only one feature of the phone, and it wasn't even like the core feature of the phone. But the Apple iPhone has like hundreds of other features which didn't even get a mention in Apple's marketing. And I think we need to take a lesson from that in fundraising, and actually hone in, because whatever program you're wanting to actually focus on, you'll probably have 5 to 10 different features of the program. And look, I actually have a worksheet that you could use to do this. But what you need to do is to actually make a list of all those features, and then go through all those features and work out why they're important. That is, to list all the
Right.
benefits,
Yep.
and then you need to rank those benefits in order of what's actually most important to your donor.
Right.
So, by way of example, do I have time to share an example?
Well, please do.
Yeah, yeah. So, by way of example, like, a really popular offer amongst a lot of overseas NGOs is clean water. So, I guess, like, so they're going to build a well, okay? Um, you're going to build a well. So, what's some of the features of the well? one of the features of the well is like a manual pump. And so why is that important? Um, it's important because it'll work in communities that don't have electricity. Okay. It's also going to, another feature is that of the well is that it's going to be plonked in the middle of the village. So why is that important? It's important because um, like people from the village, particularly women and girls for whom water collecting is their job, they're not going to have to walk 2 hours or 3 hours or half a day or however long it takes to
Right.
go and collect water. And then, well, why is it even important to have water in the first place? It's, well, so families don't get diseases and die, and so they can have clean water for cooking instead of drinking dirty water. And so if you look at those, like each one of those things is a feature and it has its own benefit. But then you need to actually look at those features and benefits and go, all right, well, what is actually the most important one? Is it to the donor? Is it most important to the donor that families don't get diseases and die? Is it most important that girls don't have to walk for 2 hours to go and collect clean water? Or is it most important that to the donor that um, that they can have a pump that will work without electricity in communities without electricity? And you can actually see that depending on your donor as well, a different benefit may actually be more attractive. So
Right.
if you're more girls oriented, like if you're a real feminist, if you're really passionate about girls' rights, you like the benefit of girls not having to walk 2 hours to collect water may be more important to you.
Right.
If you're, I guess, like if you're a really practical person, or even if you're really green, perhaps, and you don't want to you want to use clean energy, then having an item that will work without electricity may be more important to you. Or if you're just more like the classic donor um, that wants people to have access, that thinks everyone should have access to clean water, then families not dying from preventable diseases
Right.
might be more important to you. So that's totally, you could even segment your database according to which benefit is more attractive to different types of donors. That's if you can tell
Right.
which donor is which.
Yeah.
But yeah, so every program that you have will have different features and benefits, and you need to actually work out which benefit is going to be more attractive to your donor and build your appeal around that. That doesn't mean you can't mention the other benefits. You can, but usually when you distill your offer down into one sentence or $1
Yeah.
handle, it encapsulates one feature and one benefit.
Right. Yeah, you focus on the one core benefit you think will resonate the most, and you can
Yes.
for sure what we call stacking benefits. You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
you can
definitely.
have a sentence in there where you just
Yeah.
go like, and not only will it do this, it will also do this, 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 this.
Yes, that's
So you
correct.
just have one sentence that enhances the offer a little bit. I really like that you use the Retina display from iPhone. One of my favorite offers is when the iPod came out. One of my
Yes.
favorite examples of an offer. And at the time, they were competing with, I think it was maybe the Microsoft Zune. There was other MP3 players coming out on the market, and everybody was focusing very heavily on the features. It's got this many, megabytes of storage. It's
Yes,
got
that's
this
right.
kind of a display. It's got whatever. And the iPod just went with this clean picture of the iPod, which looked beautiful.
Yeah.
And then they just wrote 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Yeah, yeah.
And they could have talked about the fact that they had the most storage out of anybody. They could have talked about the fact
Mhm.
that their tech, like all their technological features, but they went with this benefit of anywhere you go, there's 1,000
Having
songs
some of
right
your,
with you
yeah,
in your
that's
pocket. Yeah.
right. Yeah, I mean
Um,
that's a really great example. But yeah, I mean going back to the example that you were talking about before, where you're trying to raise money to change laws. I mean, I wouldn't actually mind brainstorming that a little bit. If you
Well,
were,
well let's do that right now. Let's get into
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Let's see how you might break down an unsexy offer. And I'm going to change the story a little bit to
yeah, yeah,
anonymize
that's
it. But
right. Yeah,
let's
yeah.
say this is a group that has been working to change a piece of legislation. Um, let's say that makes it easier for companies to pollute. And they've been working on this one piece of legislation that would make it harder for companies to do this. And of course, their end game is, a cleaner environment,
Yeah, yeah.
and whatever. They've been working for 30 years to do this. They have maybe a passionate group of donors, but they know that if they had more funding, they could make so much more progress in a shorter amount of time. In fact, maybe they could even get that piece of legislation changed in the next year because it's election time
All
and
right.
politicians are listening. So let's go with that example. And we're going to do a mass donor campaign. So not a major donor campaign, not a grant, not a fund, not like a trustee founder service situation. Individual giving mass donor campaign. We're competing with the three C's. We're competing with cute puppies, with cancer. How do we go about this?
Yeah, and you're also so you're really talking. You're also competing with all the bigger environmental charities as well, like the ones with the big names like Greenpeace and World Wildlife Fund and all that kind of thing. So, all right. So I guess the first thing is so what are the features of the project that you're looking at? So is it are you actually what are you actually doing? Like, are you lobbying or are you researching or what are you actually doing first of all? So I
Yeah,
need to understand a
sure.
bit about the program.
Let's say we are building a case for support and we need to convince one politician to believe in this so that they will rally other politicians and put a bill together that gets tabled.
Okay.
And but in order to convince that one politician, we need to have a very good case for support so that that politician feels like this is something worth taking on and it's winnable.
Okay, so building that case for support, does that involve putting some research together for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say there's lots of research required. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So and so the all right. So there's two. So there's at this point in time, there's probably two components to this or two features to this. One is putting the research together to build the case for support, and then the other one is to get a politician on side so that you can get a bill
Right.
into. I'm assuming you have a parliament. Is it parliament in?
Yeah.
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 Okay. All right.
We've got and let's say that our
And
strategy to get that politician on board is to get as many individual donors to care about this issue so that there's enough constituents who say, "Hey, Mr. Politician, this is important to your voters. Do something about it."
all right. So that there's going to be some kind of petition or advocacy
Yeah.
involved. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is classic hard to fundraise for, unsexy to explain.
Right.
Now there's a few different ways we can there's a few different things we can do around this. First of all, if we look at this and then we kind of look at each if we look at each of these components, then we look at, well, what's the, I guess, like, why is it important to put this research together? So really at the, I guess, like at the heart of that, it becomes about, why is it hard to put this, why is this research important? So because you need to prove, that polluting the, so is this going to be, is polluting the environment, is the end result going to be bad health outcomes for people, or is it losing environment, losing habitat, or both?
A little bit of both, but I guess the main thing, and this is completely fictional, so I'm making
Yeah,
this up
that's
as
all
we
right.
go. But the main thing is, we were worried about the fact that we're all going to get cancer, or our children are going
All
to get
right,
cancer
okay. Yeah, so
because
all right.
they're going to pollute the river, and we're going to drink that water, and and or there's stuff in the air, whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay, so is going to create cancer in future generations, or your children are going to get cancer.
Right. Yeah. Which is,
Oh, yeah,
which you got to be pretty sure about that claim once you make
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But
Oh, well, you
yeah,
do, or create
yeah,
cancer, or maybe you'd have to word it a bit slightly differently. Create health issues in children,
right.
possibly including cancer or something like that.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
so if this is if this is fictional, we can kind of make it up as well. But and then if you get um, okay, so if we and then we've also got this petition as well, or getting together this advocacy group. And so why is this important? Because this is I guess, like, for example, because these are families who care about, I guess, like, about the health and longevity of their children, health and lives of their
yeah.
loved
They-
ones and children.
yeah, they care about the future of their children. They may also just care about sticking it to the man. They may
Yeah,
have
okay.
this kind of idea about big industry polluting, polluting our world and getting away with it, and making a big profit off of it. So there may be some of that feeling.
So you've
Um,
this is good because it actually means you've got an enemy as well. And
mhm,
creating an enemy as fundraising is always good, although I often have trouble with it because charities don't often want to. They often want to. We want to work with these people. They're always saying we want to work with these people, not demonize these people. Whereas I actually think they would get further if they just went ahead and created the enemy. But that's okay.
right.
So usually the enemy is either the government or a big bad corporate. In this case, it would be the corporate. Um, so we have a possible enemy here as well, and then when we look at this, we need to convincing one politician to put together a bill. Okay, so the benefit of doing this is to actually affect, or you actually want to achieve long-term change. Um, you want to achieve, or you want to save. Well, really, it comes down. Affecting long-term change is the jargon's way of saying it. What you're really wanting to say is that you can actually save. You can save your children's lives, or save the lives of your family, of your
Yeah,
families in future. Um, or stop, you know, um, stop
now,
debilitating illnesses or something like that.
right now, when you are talking about saving our children's future, what I'm hearing is a slight threat to legacy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But when you actually, now when you put these three things together, okay, so
Hmm.
you've got these benefits of fighting against environmental pollution that will create cancer or other illnesses. Um, and then also, I mean, really, this comes down to, and then also about another benefit. So the benefit is fighting against polluting the environment. That's going to create health issues or even cancer in children. Um, is also securing, I guess, the long-term health and safety of your families and children. That's
Hmm.
to do with the bill,
Yeah,
and then um, I guess, like, another benefit is fighting against money hungry corporates that
right.
don't care about the health
Yep.
and safety. So if you put it in terms like that, so instead of saying something like $50 to change the laws, to change and $50 to change laws so companies can pollute, to make it harder for companies to pollute the environment, which people would get angry about. But if you make it personal and say $50 to $50 to stop potential health issues, including cancer, from money hungry, polluting companies. That's a lot more emotive,
Right.
than just changing laws on its own.
Right.
I
So
mean, would you
you have
agree or disagree?
you're leaving out the research part. You're leaving out some of those things that we're actually doing in the background, and that's what you're talking about. It is talking about the benefits
Yes,
versus sort of the process you're going to take, and
yes,
some of the features. It is
yes,
really, what does this mean for you? What does this mean to you and your family and your future? Why should you care about this? You don't care about the fact that we're going to hire researchers and lobbyists. You don't care about the fact that we're probably going to have to befriend 50 different politicians over the course of 2 years until we find somebody who's kind of willing
yeah,
to lend us their ear. You don't care about that. You care about the fact that, hey, this is a threat to you and your family in your own community that you should know about,
yeah,
and
that's
there's
right.
something you can do about it.
And that's not to say as well that you can't talk about those other things, but in your offer, you want it to be that emotive thing that links back to why you should personally care, because it's about the health of your family. But that's not to
Right.
say that in the body of the letter you can't say, oh, well, we have a 3-step plan for addressing this, which includes doing this research to put together the case for support that will prove X, Y, and Z. This also means lobbying this number of politicians so we can get this bill through Parliament, and secure the health of your families for years to come. As long as you always link it back to the benefit, you can talk about those things, but you just wouldn't make it the cornerstone of the single sentence ask. And yeah, and it's like you said, we don't talk about those things necessarily up front. And even going back to the Apple iPhone example, when they talked about the Retina display, they didn't talk about the teams of developers that had to, that came up with the camera, you know,
Right.
or that came
Yeah.
up with the optics, or that came up with the software to actually give you those results or anything like that. Which is what the people internally, the staff internally, would want to talk about. But
Absolutely.
all the buyer cares about is,
Yeah.
well, why does this all matter to me? And it's because my pictures look amazing. And it's the same with your, I guess, with this semi-fictional, um, law changing offer. It's people don't care about what you have to do necessarily behind the scenes, to actually achieve this, to achieve. To actually secure their family's health and well-being. What they care about is that their health and well-being is under threat, and so that's what
Right.
you actually have to put into the offer.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess that's another example. And I think if you're doing anything that's law related or advocacy related or research related, that's the work that you have to do. Is how do you actually link this back to the impact on an individual? Like, who is actually going to benefit from these laws being changed, and how are they going to actually benefit, and why is
Yeah.
that important? So yeah.
Yep. All right, so we're gonna ask why 5 times. We're gonna try to get back to, what does this actually mean for a human? What does, we want to buy an expensive machine to help with research? Well, that's fine, but what will that make possible, and why?
Yeah,
And why is that important? And why does that matter? And why would somebody care about that? And what is the tangible thing that somebody can visualize, that they can picture how it will make a difference for somebody, like themselves or somebody they care about or somebody in the world? Tie it back to why should a human care about this? And the answer likely isn't that they're going to care about because you have a unique process,
yeah, that's right.
or a unique methodology, or
Yes.
a unique way of going about it. The answer is likely they're going to care about it, because it affects another human, or because it affects themselves at some point.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think, we when we work in our nonprofits and our charities, we do tend to get very caught up in what we want to tell the donor, not what the
Yeah.
donor wants to know. So we have to be really careful about that all the time, and even more so when we're developing our offers, because the offer is, you know, like they say, in terms of the success of your fundraising appeal, your list is responsible for 50% of the success of your appeal, and then another 30 to 40% is your offer, and then the remaining 10 to 15% is your copywriting and the execution of your creative, which is a bit depressing for copywriters like me. But the reality is, I mean, that's one of the reasons why, as a copywriter, I actually spend a lot of time with my clients developing the offer and how we're going to frame the offer and how we're going to talk
Right.
about the offer. Because once we get that right, the rest of the appeal is developed around that. I never, ever, ever start writing an appeal until I know what the offer is going to be and how we're actually, and have a reasonably good idea of how we're actually going to frame it. So
Right.
there's just no point.
Yeah. A good offer covers a multitude
Mm.
of sins, of copywriting
Yeah,
sins.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And the thing is that a strong offer with weak copywriting will do better than a weak offer with strong copywriting. Look, I can, and I have to admit, particularly with a lot of charities where we can't get approval for the best kind of offer, I spend a lot of time and energy trying to make a weak offer sound good, and I can do that. But donors aren't stupid. You know, if you're not tangible enough, if you're not specific enough, if you're not speaking to their emotions and values, they can actually see through that. So,
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah, I always say that almost every appeal, including almost every appeal that leaves our shop, can be improved by improving the offer even more.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the reality is that we all run up against a lot of internal constraints, some of which are real, some of which are imagined,
yes,
some of which are somewhere in the middle. Um, the truth is that most fundraising appeals could have a stronger offer
yeah,
and could be improved by having a stronger offer.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. So,
Well, well, this is great, June. Thank you so much for workshopping this on the fly. I really
yeah,
appreciate you joining us. Appreciate you making the time difference work from Australia
yeah,
to
no, that's
Canada, and
okay.
I'm glad this worked out. I'll the last question I'll ask you is, we ask this of every guest that comes on the show. Do you have a piece of encouragement, a word of advice for every single fundraiser and marketer who is who's doing the hard work of building good inner world day in and day out?
Look, I think my encouragement to you would be just to keep just to keep at it. I think that we as fundraisers do amazing work. And look, I could take my direct marketing skills and direct mail skills and go work for a commercial enterprise and try and convince people to buy, I don't know, Apple iPhones or cornflakes or chocolates, or whatever the case might be. But we shouldn't be embarrassed about using our skills to convince people to make the world a better place. I feel like often a lot of fundraisers, even a lot of fundraisers, feel, we get a lot of flack from other people who feel that we're manipulating others into giving. And I don't see it that way. It's like we are trying to, I could spend my working life trying to persuade people, to buy cars or iPhones, like I said before, or whatever the case might be. But I prefer to spend my days persuading people to support great causes, and we shouldn't be ashamed of that. Like, the work we do is really important, and even though a lot of people don't understand, I think, what we do, I would rather spend my time trying to convince people to make the world a better place, to try and right some of the injustices in the world, to try and bring more joy and happiness and preserve the beautiful planet that we live on.
Yeah.
Um, then look, and I'm not anti-capitalist at all, but I would rather do this work than to try and make, you know, some kind of corporate enterprise more rich. I mean, like I said, I'm not anti-capitalist, but I want us to use our money to make the world better and to alleviate some of the pain and suffering that we see every day.
Yeah. I just so agree with you that especially direct response fundraisers get so much flack
Yes.
about being
Yeah.
manipulative, or about, this sounds icky, or this is not who we are, or and the truth is, when people say that, you they think that we can somehow manipulate donors into giving, and that just
Mhm.
offends the intelligence of donors.
Yeah.
Because donors are really kind, caring, thoughtful, compassionate individuals who make their own choices.
Yeah.
And our job is to lead them toward greater generosity and help them become better versions of themselves. We are not manipulating anybody. We're not tricking anybody. If we would be able to do that, nonprofits would grow a lot faster. If we could manipulate people into giving us money, think about how
Yeah.
much money we could raise. No, we're trying to inspire people, and we're trying to help them become better versions of themselves. And in the process, we're building a community of people who care about the same stuff.
Yeah.
And I just so agree with your approach here, and with everything you've said, which is just helping people understand why they're needed, and a specific and meaningful thing that they can be part of.
Yeah. I mean, it's, the thing is that every day, especially given that a lot of us live in relatively wealthy countries, a lot of donors don't think anything of going out and spending $100 on a meal with their family.
Yeah,
It's like, well, that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I have no issue with trying to persuade that same donor to spend $100 on feeding a hungry child, or changing environmental laws so we can retain our beautiful natural
sure.
environments, or to buy hospital equipment so that somebody's life can be saved. You know, in the scheme of things, often that money is not a deal breaker for a donor. It's not like they're choosing between. Um, it's not like they're choosing between starving or, a lot of our donors have a lot of disposable income, and you know it's if we can persuade them to do something really great with it, that can make a difference in somebody's life. I'm actually proud to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm proud to be able to spread love and joy and
yeah,
all these other great things across the
yeah.
world.
Me too. We are merchants of joy and meaning,
Yes.
and that's a pretty great thing to be. June, if people want to find you, where can they go to learn more? Where can they go to download? You mentioned you had a bit of a cheat sheet about features and benefits. Where can people find all of that stuff?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll provide you, Mike, with a link to a special cheat sheet, which I use it for pretty much every job that I do, to actually list out the features and benefits, um, and I use that to develop appeals. So I can make that cheat sheet available. I'll send you a link, Mike, which you can then include
We'll put in the
with the
show
link in the
notes. Yep,
podcast.
absolutely.
Otherwise, you can also sign up to my newsletter by going to www.junesfundraisingletter.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn as well under June Steward. And I am on Twitter as well, but I'm a lot more active on LinkedIn. And
Hmm.
yeah, look, I love connecting with other fundraisers, and feel free to drop me a line, say hello, tell me what you're doing. Yeah, it's great to connect with other fundraisers and other people who care about raising funds for charity as well.
Yeah. Thanks again, June. Appreciate you coming on the
Okay,
show.
no worries. And thanks a lot for having me. This is the first time I've done something in Canada, and it's great to be able to share knowledge and expertise and anecdotes and war stories across borders as well, especially at this point in time.
Right. Across the world, 40% of our listeners come from Canada, 60% come from elsewhere. So
Okay,
so
great.
this is fantastic.
Okay, excellent.
All right.
All right. Thanks a lot for that, Mike.